Hi, so I'm here with Dave from Lionhead Studios, just the creator of Fable Legends. Thank you very much for your time to begin with. What I want to know is obviously Fable is such a huge, massive British cultural game, and you've sort of taken it, dissected it, and turned it into something completely fresh and new. How challenging was that, taking it from such a stable game and creating your own spin on it?
Very challenging. I mean, Fable's a beloved franchise, and it's got its unique flavor to it. It's got a decade of history, literally, and even more than that if you count like the years that Fable was in development before the first Fable ever came out. It's a fantastic franchise, and I'm honored and privileged to add to it, right? You know, to be honest, it's a big cooperative effort. You know, I could not and wouldn't even dream of doing it alone. We've got a great staff of more than 100 people that are working on Fable Legends back in Guildford for Lionhead Studios, and many of them have been working for a long time on previous Fable titles. So when we came in and thought about what we wanted to do next with Fable, and I was really excited to join a franchise that I'd been a fan of, and then get to add a little bit of my own and take the great ideas from the team about what they wanted to do. When we thought about, when we were kicking off Fable Legends 2 years ago, a little more than 2 years ago now, about what we wanted to do, a lot of it was keeping loyal to the core ideas of the previous Fable years, right? And that means, having the option to be good or evil, and having cool stories to tell, and adding something unique and different every title, whether that's a dog or ruling a kingdom, or no matter what that was, every Fable has added something unique to the franchise. And that's kind of what we wanted to do too, to add something new and to add some innovation and try new things.
Okay, so for people who haven't seen Fable Legends before, can you just give us a sort of an outsider look going into what the new story is and how the game plays instead?
Sure. The new Fable Legends brings you back to the world of Albion, this wonderful kind of magical fairy tale world. And we're going to bring you back several hundred years before the first Fable, right? So that means that it's back to a time of magic and folklore and fairy tale where helpless, idiotic, stupid villagers huddle inside their villages. That's what they always do in Fable games. They're kind of stupid and cowardly. But that's the difference, right? You get to be the hero, the exception to that human rule of weakness. And you're the only ones, heroes are the only people that are brave enough or foolish enough to risk missing dinner in order to go out and into the dark woods and scary places. The first Fable really took inspiration from kind of dark fairy tales, Grimm's fairy tales, and those kinds of notions. And we went back to mine that idea, right? So the creatures that we've sometimes seen in our videos with these red hats, those are creatures out of actual Scottish folklore called redcaps. And redcaps dip their hats in the blood of their enemies. It's kind of macabre stuff, right?
Creepy.
A little creepy. And our spin on that to do something a little different is, if in folklore, if their hats ever dried out, they die. So in our folklore, these redcaps start putting nails in their own heads in order to make sure their hats would never run dry. That's a little kind of gross. But that said, that's part of Fable lore too, right? To have a little bit of body humor and a little bit of silliness and a little bit of scariness too, right? We want to mix all those options in so that when we tell a new story in Fable, it can be dramatic, it can be tragic, losing your dog, very tragic story, I know. I had to sacrifice a villager to just resurrect him, and poor villager. Or it can be just comic, right? All of those in between is what makes Fable unique, is that we have moments of levity, and then we can have moments of kind of seriousness, right? And the mix of those is what makes Fable different and what makes it work.
Yeah. So I was going to say, I've had a quick go with the game before. I was team villain. Now, playing as a villain, it plays a little bit like an RTS, like a proper strategy game. Yep. So that completely took me aback from what I'm used to with Fable.
Yeah.
How difficult was the challenge of trying to create two different game modes into the one game and make sure it still plays fluidly?
It's a big challenge. It's not unlike making two games, right? In some sense, we have to make a fun game for the heroes, make a fun game for the villain, and then somehow, when both people are having fun, they're not hurting the fun of the other person, right? Both sides are out to win, but we've deliberately crafted it so that the villain has a certain number of points and creatures and this kind of thing, and the things that the villain does to win make fun things for the heroes to do, right? That's how the game is made to be balanced. Now, in the studio, right, if you really go back in Guildford's, development history, you can look at some Bullfrog history, and you can look at things like Dungeon Keeper, and that's obviously, and even Black and White and Populous, some of those are in the DNA of the studio still, right? Some of the people who go back that far. So the idea of playing an evil overlord, that's kind of always what we wanted to do, right? And so mixing that into our Fable allows us to have a little bit of peanut butter and chocolate at the same time. So it's been a lot of fun. balancing-wise, it's the worst nightmare of my life, right? And it's going to be a nightmare as we go into beta and for months, many months to come. Getting that right and continue to tweak it and make it better, that's our job, right?
So I was going to say, obviously, if you choose play as the villain, or if your friend comes over and plays the villain where you're playing through the story mode campaign, if the villain wins, how will that affect the campaign mode? Will you just have to replay the quest, or will it alter the campaign?
So the primary consequence, you have to progress on one of the two sides. So just like any kind of game narrative, right? You can win on the side of the villain, or you can win on the side of the heroes to go on and progress the next quest. Now there are some exceptions to that. You get to take all the gold and loot and stuff you found, even if you lost that quest. You may be coming home with a lot more power, so that the next time you do that quest, you're likely to have find an easier time with it, for one. And the other thing is that you can always play it with your friends. So if you've been playing Fable Legends a lot, and this is my first time playing it, and you're off in quest 14 or quest 23 or whatever quest you're on, you can always join a friend. So much like watching a TV show, if I'm watching, I don't know, Star Trek or Buffy or whatever, and you're in the middle of the 4th season, the story won't make as much sense for me. But we'll give you a little bit of a cinematic intro. We'll tell you why you're there. The meta plot won't make sense, but your objectives in the quest still will. So you can always play with your friends, no matter where you are within the plot.
Okay. That's superb. Now, obviously, I've been playing Fable Anniversary recently, and that's had the smart glass sort of touch to it, where you can go through your inventory and have a look at the map, etc. This would be a prime candidate for smart glass for villain-wise. Have you got any sort of intentions of using the smart glass technology? Or are you just looking at keeping it console-based?
No, we absolutely want to do smart glass. It's such a cool opportunity for us because we pointed out ourselves and fans who played the game had said, I think you could play this villain game on a smart glass. Right, so you can imagine, drawing a quick circle around a creature and telling it to attack a specific hero or use a special ability. Now that work is still in its infancy for us, and we have some technical challenges to solve, right? So I'm playing on my smart glass with you playing as a hero in the same room. We really have to make sure that that's a fun experience for both sides, that the latency is really low, that even on a tablet, which obviously has a little less horsepower than an Xbox, that you have a very responsive gameplay experience with very little latency, so that when a hero walks into a trap, you can spring that trap in a reasonable amount of time. So our first obligation is to make the villain mode really fun and awesome here on the console using a controller. But eventually, that's something we're looking into, and we've started experimenting with in-house to put that villain gameplay right on your smart glass, so I can go over to your house and beat you at your own place here on my tablet.
Superb, superb. Now, obviously, Fable is a lot, because it's an RPG. You can place hours and hours and hours and hours into it. I must rack up 60 to 70 hours each sort of playthrough. Are we looking at the same type of hours, considering it's a completely different style of game, or is it going to be a bit more of a structured, guided hand sort of game?
It's most like Fable 1, where you start in your hometown, you're much like the guild in Fable 1, and you have a series of quests unlocked, and more of them unlock over time. You choose what quest you want to go on, and then you can go off on that quest in single player with AI, or we can matchmaking you with someone, or you can play with your friends. All those options available to you. You'll go out with a specific objective for that quest, and then return back to Bright Lodge. Now, there's a lot of hours of gameplay there. And then on top of that, every hero has a unique spin on their own story. With these different voice actors and the different voiced characters, there's really a very large multiplier that comes in with both how you can play and then who you play with changes the story as well. So depending on who you have on that quest, whether you're playing the villain or the hero, all of those are big kind of multiplayers, right? We have a big story that we want to tell in the first season, and then in the episodic nature that we've talked about earlier, right when you finish the first story, that doesn't mean it's over. A few weeks later, we'll have a new story and a new quest. This episodic structure means that the game's never going to be over. So even after you complete the first meta plot, the first arc of stories that tie together, we're going to start another one a month later, and then that will kick off and have Quest 1, Quest 2, Quest 3, Quest 4, etc. in this new story campaign that introduces a new arch-villain, starts introducing new hero characters that you can play, new creatures to fight against. We really have this big ambition to not just have a game that you play once for a month or so, but keep coming back to for years.
That's phenomenal. So all I want to say was thank you so much for your time. I think obviously I might have bored you just enough. One more question I did want to ask. On the trailer, the cinematic trailer, there's 4 more heroes which just appeared. The chickens. And know they are a Fable stable, and they have to be in there. Is that a hint that as part of the DLC then for Chapter 2 we may be able to go as chickens?
Well, I don't think it's the hint for the DLC. I think it's a hint for the release of the game. You know, it wouldn't be Fable if we didn't have some chickens, and I wouldn't have had my art team modeling them and building them and doing it if we didn't want to include them.
Fair enough. Well, thank you very much for your time, Dave. Been very much appreciated. Thank you.